Hello everyone and welcome. Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have MultiVac MTV video here. Today we covered MTV maybe a week ago, I believe now. Not a lot has changed in all honesty in terms of communication and things like that. But I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points here. One being the aspect of the chart, and two, just a couple of things around socials that are of relative interest to me, not from the information perspective, but the communication perspective. It's something we talk about quite heavily with the likes of MultiVac recently. Those that are new to the channel or new to MultiVac, perhaps, we saw very early in the year, in fact, the 31st December, the previous CEO, Frank, stepping down for personal or health reasons, we believe, and that's what the statement provided. Then Sean was put in and still continues to be, i.e. the leader of MultiVac. And it's been a bit of a rocky ride because we are in a downward trend of the general market anyway, so that hasn't helped for sure. And we will definitely go into the chart shortly anyway. But in this downward spiral for MultiVac and other projects, so MultiVac in particular, had this kind of like lack of communication perspective. They then, about a month or so ago, brought out a roadmap which was in a strange text format for a Medium article. It wasn't really sort of provided in arguably a professional way, or a way that investors or believers in this project would have expected. So they reinstated the roadmap and everything properly a few weeks later, which is fine. It's been corrected now, and also the additions of the likes of Kathy here, the VP of Community and Ecosystem, but also a couple of other people here as well. So we've got this Hannah also via Telegram, who will be able to answer questions apparently every Tuesday and Thursday. So really cool to see this aspect, that slowly but surely communication methods are improving with MultiVac. But there of course are a couple of things still outstanding. This from yesterday, where Magic Animals has basically tweeted a few questions from an AMA with Sean. Of course, as mentioned here about the hackathon, for example, when they were doing their audits a while back, they did find some issues with MultiVac, and that's pretty normal for any project, to be honest. And if you've got a low-resourced team, or your other priority, well, I wouldn't say priorities because audits are a high priority for projects, of course. It can take some time to resurrect these things. First of all, finding the issue, and then fixing them, right? Now, this is where I think they could probably really do with some form of like bounty program, or like a hackathon, like this person has mentioned about. When can a hackathon basically begin? But in the preparation of hackathon, there are currently no technical obstacles, so it looks like they might do that very soon. Really interesting. But the other interesting thing about this, and again, thanks to Magic Animals for putting this together, actually, nodes. Now, I have a couple of nodes from other different projects, and this is a really, really good way of earning a lot of reward. And I think with MultiVac, if they can get these node operations up and running, there's first of all a lot of MultiVac holders, right? There's a lot of stakers. There's a lot of staking of MTV going on all the time. And I think that MultiVac, if they get this node application up and running for people to be able to do this, I truly think that this could be what is one of the catalysts to bring MultiVac back up in terms of price, and in terms of its awareness and perhaps its credibility in some aspects. I still think it's got a lot to do to win a lot of people back over. I know there's loads of channels out there that were heavily involved with MTV last year. I knew of MTV. I didn't invest until later last year, probably midway through the bull market that we had. And I'm always open about that. I wanted to do more research, see how it was going. Obviously, if I had waited a couple months more and saw the the downtrend of MTV, I might have been sat there going, oh, I'm glad I waited. But I was in because I believed in the technology even from day one, regardless to whether I was invested or not. But I do think that having seen this journey in such a short space of time, a load of people talking about MTV, and maybe that was from paid sponsorship, I don't know. We don't have that on this channel. We prefer to be biased and just very generally open and honest about everything that we do. And that is it. I found MultiVac through Cheeky Crypto, very great channel. Got me interested in crypto through 2020. Through difficult times, of course. And, I know themselves and some others have pulled out of MTV. And that's fine. Everyone has done their own thoughts on why they do it. And that's absolutely brilliant. But I'm sticking by. I'm using this opportunity to gather MultiVac as much as possible. But I really like this aspect here. The aspect of, they're mentioning here some intricate detail about what they expect for the operation and usability of nodes and how you can utilize those yourselves. So I can't share much more information at the moment until all the details are finalized. So I'm really interested in this aspect, and hopefully I can get hold of one, or at least one. I don't know the prices of them or this, that and the other, but hopefully we can do that. But here we go. How many MultiVac will I need to operate a node 1 million MTV tokens? Well, I'm upfront about this. I've been gathering MTV gradually. Why? Because of the situation. Both the situation MultiVac this year so far, and also the general market. I don't know if we're going low. I don't know if we're going higher right now. We're in pretty much a global recession. You have to understand this. In fact, what I'm going to do, keep this in mind about 1 million tokens. Let's switch to the chart because we can talk about this in a bit more detail and my explanations behind it properly. So obviously on this big tail down from last October, November, really, I would argue that, certainly from December onwards was the real kind of trigger point for a lot of projects. Okay. So you kind of had this profit taking element, but then it just became all the narratives around the world went crazy, energy, blah, blah, blah. Not going to mention the other ones. We know what's going on. And we're now back down here. And this is really interesting. So the reason I'm gradually building MTV, like I said, is we're in a downward trend. I don't know if we'll come down lower, but I do have buy positions back down here. And I'll tell you the reasons behind that in a second. But I also think that, just do due diligence on any project, any research you can do will influence these kind of decisions. And for me, like I said, the lack of communication at the beginning of the year doesn't mean just because they're doing some of it now that we're out of that. I want to see more improvements, and I want to see more technological advancements of MultiVac as a project. We've all seen the website, we've all seen the white paper. It's very impressive on paper, literally, the whole entire project. But I want to start seeing some fruition. But I do think that this node aspect could really encourage some interaction and more integration with people, both investors, speculative investors, and people that are just interested in technology and using nodes or buying nodes. I think this could be a really good thing for them. But timing is really important. You see a lot of projects out there are pulling things at the moment because the market conditions, and that's totally acceptable. Why you could argue that sometimes the best times to do things and announce things are in the bad regions, but then you arguably want to be involved in something that's on an uprise in price point because the perception is that this is up and running, this is going crazy, this is going mad, and then FOMO kicks in and people just jump in because it's all crazy money, right? But from a project perspective, down here is probably, arguably, not a great time to be releasing certain things, okay? So that's why I'm a bit cautious in the sense that we're testing some really interesting ground on MTV here. If you look at the Fibonacci retracement chart, this is taking us back to the lower regions that we saw ages ago back here last year. Okay, so that's my lowest point, and I'm just doing all the way up to here, which is one of our last kind of resistance areas, if you like. Okay, and it paints a really interesting picture because we're literally bang on this mark here on the green, 0.0027-ish. Okay, so we're currently floating price point at the 0.00265 mark. Okay, so it's very much around this area, right? Just under that, a third of a cent to a second of a cent. I don't even know whether that's right terminology or not, but this is where we are. And we did draw this circle in the last video to suggest that we're probably going to have some sideways trading based around this kind of area, and points that we saw back here in March last year, and some touch points roughly around here in July last year as well. So I have my buy order down here because the market in general is still quite flat. The volumes are low. There's still very much a load of negativity around the world. Here in the UK, again, another announcement of interest rate hikes, further to the one we've already had, and probably more to come like there are around the world. And it's like, this is probably going to drag out. I could probably see these kind of things going on for another few months. But we've seen this last year, right? We've seen this last year. If you remember last year, a lot of the projects had a very similar shape pattern. And MultiVac was a bit different because of different launch times. But around July 2021, pretty much most projects had this weird V shape. It doesn't look like this on MultiVac, but they had this like little V shape. It's basically like a big uptake and then this big crash thing. I feel we're kind of around that area right now. So there could be an opportunity very soon in the coming months where we start seeing a bit of an uplift, possibly. But until that, I see some really interesting triggers on that, both on RSIs and other data algorithms that I use. I'm in the anticipation that we'll have, some, not volatility, but certainly some areas of interest still around this area, and potentially testing these lower regions. And the reason I put those areas down here is because, again, these touch points back here in last March, and of course this big failure of Bitcoin that we saw in May could arguably test these lower areas. So that's what I'm doing MultiVac. I'm buying MultiVac now, but I'm also holding out some as well for the lower regions. I'm just taking advantage of both possibilities. And I have probably got, I would say, around about 1/10 of a million. Obviously not enough for a node, so I do need to sort myself out perhaps a bit more. But I'm doing risk assessment on this just because it's an opportunity there, and I'm going, oh wow, 1 million tokens. But I'm relatively late to the party with MultiVac compared to probably a lot of you out there. But maybe you're just as new as I am, or even newer than I am. You must do some risk assessment and not just jump in and go, oh, I want a node, I'm going to spend 1 million MTV tokens. But when they do release the nodes, and like I said, people are interested in the node application, it could trigger some spike prices. You just don't know. But that is absolutely a possibility. I do think majority of that money will probably come from stakers, and people are holding MultiVac for some time in the background, just waiting to see what happens. But a lot of people don't necessarily have an interest in nodes, and that's fine as well. But me personally, I do. So it's really something of interest to me, and something that I might just accumulate a bit more just for that anticipation, but there's no concrete deliverable yet. So we need to start seeing a bit of a shift of narrative a bit more into a positive aspect for those nodes for me to jump into that. But that aside, guys, I'm going to point out a couple of things here on the chart as well. So we've already discussed this level here of the sideways trading that we were expecting. We are actually, surprisingly, up for the week, 1.76, just about, literally. But the rest of the data is still extremely poor, or arguably understandable. But we are seeing a bit of a nice uplift here, if you like. Nothing compared to what we saw in February, or this big, well, I say big, it's a relatively interesting uplift here in March. But we're kind of like leveling ourselves out. And I do have an interest in this because the levels are really low, but they're stable. They're stabilizing. It's really slow to observe this and see this, but it's not until you see the bigger picture that actually we're getting a bit of a sideways movement here. And the RSIs from a purchasing perspective, as you know, I do like anything that's under that 40 mark on a 14-day and a 28-day. We're very, very low on these right now. 28 is extremely low. It's not even as low as back here on the 30th of April, We saw a low of 20 on the 14 RSI, which is absolutely mental. So if you are a macro level trader and you're looking for a couple of weeks sort of movements, it is good probably in that aspect. And it's also good for general DCA averages, intake of allocation as well. So that's what I do. For the 28 days, a bit more different because I'm looking at like the monthly perspective, and look at that, back on the 30, it was around 30. So it's still floating around these really low areas of real interest to me. And even on that 90 day now, from that perspective, it's low, it's super low. And a few days ago, it was around 43.41, it's 43.58 now. It's very near that 40 mark that I have an interest in. And I'm very close to just accumulating more MTV in a big batch at this kind of area, but still anticipation they might come down a tad lower. But that algorithm of the RSI for the 90 day, if you take that 3 months ahead and potentially where that number goes from 43 to potentially 70, maybe 80, it gives you a definitive background, a certification that you have essentially doubled your position from that buy point 3 months ago, if that makes sense. And that's how these 14, 90 and 28 day ones in particular work. It's basically a historic background of what happened those times previously, but also you can use it as a methodology of what happens in the future as well. Good elements of data to go on, rather than just pinpointing prices all the time. Like, you can do it manually, of course, but I just use the RSIs because it's really based on the proper algorithm of the chart. So it's very interesting. But yeah, we'll wrap that up, guys, because basically, as I said, I've got a buy order down here. I did expect some sideways trading. We're saying that right now, but are we going to hold this or pull ourselves down a bit further? And that lower level, guys, is literally dipping down to that 0.002 mark and slightly under as well. So it'd be very, very interesting. And that actually almost just about matches up with here on the 19th of May last year. Literally just over that 0.002 mark. So it's going to be interesting for sure. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Do let us know in the comments below if you're still holding MTV, if you're staking, if you're waiting, what are you doing? But are you guys also interested in the node aspects as well? Because I do think that's going to have a bit of an impact on price and also the credibility of MultiVac if they get that sorted soon. Thanks for watching, guys. We will indeed see you in the next MultiVac update video. Bye-bye.